service for developing the money advice tool, which gives people important practical support in managing their finances.
Red Morris.
Significant economic activity is ready to be unlocked by the Hordern Housing Master Plan developed by Durham County Council. The scheme ticks all the boxes, would benefit small businesses, the green economy, improve housing and support the government's levelling up and build back better agenda. So will the Minister support the plan and help bring much needed investment to my constituency?
Of course, I'd like to inform the honourable gentleman that we are very supportive of any schemes in this country which promote the net zero agenda. I'm very interested to hear about the details of his scheme in his constituency, and I'd be very happy to meet him and other people to discuss these matters further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The north of England, and in particular Bury, has the potential to become a hub for start-ups, research and development and innovation. This should also be utilised in the fight against coronavirus and the government's efforts to secure a vaccine that will end the pandemic. Will my right honourable friend ensure the vaccine task force relies on the strength of the whole of the UK, such as by distributing manufacturing capacity across the country?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Vaccines Task Force, which is part of my department, has made incredible progress in securing access to the most promising vaccine candidates. We've also invested to build our manufacturing capacity in Oxford, Essex, Scotland and North Wales, and we'll continue to work with the UK bioindustry to determine how to further develop our vaccine capabilities across the whole of our country.
We now come to Alan Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of the government's planned 6 nuclear sites, so far we've got the most expensive plant in the world at Hinkley. Toshiba's walked away from Moorside and now Hitachi's given up in Wilford and Albury. So instead of relying on a Chinese state company to deliver the remaining 2 nuclear sites, isn't it time the government followed the private sector and ditched this outdated technology?
Clearly, he and I have different views on this particular issue. I mean, it stands to reason that as we go towards net zero, we will need dispatchable power, we will need a source of firm power, and most of the analysis that we've seen suggests that nuclear does have a part to play in that net zero future.
Andrew Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Harrogate and Knaresborough has a very large conference and events industry, mainly driven by the Harrogate Convention Centre, which is now a Nightingale Hospital. I've raised the industry's specific challenges with ministers already, but I understand that my right honourable friend has been having discussions with the sector directly. Perhaps he could update the House on those discussions, and will he meet me to discuss the specific challenges for the industry in my constituency?
Mr. Speaker, the government, of course, recognise the challenges facing this industry, and he's right. I've heard directly from representatives of the NEC as well about these challenges. Conference and events business can draw on the government's current support package, but I know that my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, who has responsibility for the sector, will continue to work closely with them.
Nadia Whitton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government must make a just transition to a lower carbon economy happen, and in doing so create green jobs. Will the Minister outline for the House the number of green jobs that have been created since he's been in post? And specifically, which green technologies and industries can expect investment from the government over the next year?
Well, Mr. Speaker, we currently have close to 500,000 green jobs in the country. We want to create another 2 million. She will also know that the Chancellor has announced the Green Homes Grant package, and that's going to support over 100,000 green jobs.
Aaron Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spoke last week with my constituent David Bevan, who runs the Alive network, the UK's largest live entertainment booking agency. Now, he and I acknowledge that he's already had an awful lot of support from the government through grants, furlough, bounce-back loans, VAT deferral and so on. But times are tough at the moment, but he expects things to be busier than ever when we get to the other side. What more can his department do to help his business get to the other side?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that my honourable friend welcomes our jobs package. Of course, the government continues to provide a full range of measures to protect jobs, business and livelihoods. And of course, I want this sector, indeed every sector, to return to normal as soon as possible, but that will require scientific evidence to show it is safe to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the Prime Minister announced that the UK will be bringing forward what he called a very ambitious national contribution to COP26. So can the Secretary of State confirm that what that really means is that the NDC will be published this year, and crucially, that it will, at the very least, be aligned with 1.5 degrees?
Here, here.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've had the honour and the pleasure of being questioned by the Honourable Lady at a select committee in recent days. What I would say to her, just repeat what I said then, which is that we are asking all countries to come forward with ambitious NDCs, and I completely understand that there will be a requirement on the UK as well.
Chris Clarkson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Haywood Magic Market in my constituency has been offering stalls for just £28 a week, enabling sole traders and the self-employed to find new innovative ways of earning a living during the coronavirus pandemic. Will my right honourable friend join me in congratulating the staff, the traders and the board of the Magic Market for their ingenuity and community spirit, and reiterate the department's long-standing commitment to small traders and entrepreneurs who will be essential to rebuilding our post-COVID economy?
Secretary Sharma.
Mr. Speaker, I'm absolutely delighted to offer my congratulations to Haywood Magic Market for demonstrating such innovation. Indeed, everyone involved with this initiative. As my honourable friend knows, in May I announced a discretionary grant scheme to support market traders, and we absolutely back entrepreneurs and innovators in Haywood and Middleton across the country. The Conservatives have always been the party of business, and we will always continue to be the party of business.
In order to allow the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business and the safe arrival of those participating in the next, I am suspending the House for 3 minutes. Order. Order. I call the Secretary of State, Gavin Williamson, to make a statement. Gavin Williamson.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a statement regarding the return of students to universities. Throughout this pandemic, our priority has always been to keep young people as safe as possible while they continue to learn. It is this commitment to learning and skills that has led the Prime Minister to announce today that through our Lifetime Skills Guarantee, we will upgrade further education colleges across the country with huge capital investment. We'll expand the apprenticeship offer, we'll fund valuable free technical courses for adults equivalent to A-level, and extend our digital boot camps. We'll expand and transform the funding system so it is easy for a student to get a loan for a higher technical course, as easy for that as it is for a university degree. The government will give everyone a flexible lifelong loan entitlement to 4 years of post-18 education, so adults will be able to retrain with high-level technical courses instead of being trapped in unemployment. At the beginning of September, we saw the successful reopening of our schools and colleges. Universities have been working just as hard to make campuses as safe as possible, including through enhanced cleaning measures, social distancing on campuses, and changes to timetables to stagger and manage attendance on site. We've now seen the new intake of first-year students who are beginning a new chapter in their lives at university, together with those who are returning to carry on their studies. I know this will not be the start that any of them would have wanted or expected, and I'd just like to say that I'm pleased to see both universities and students have followed the guidance in a responsible way, putting themselves, their friends and the local community in a safe place and out of harm's way. Students, as well as the wider community, accept when we are living in a global pandemic, we have to operate in a society with restrictions. But I do not believe that we should look to inflict stricter measures on students or expect higher standards of students' behaviour from them than we would from any other section of society. There must be a parity. The decision to keep universities open and all of our students learning has been a result of an enormous team effort throughout the university and higher education sector. We have drawn on the expertise of a HE task force that we set up, and we've been providing robust public health advice and regular updates to the sector to help them to plan carefully to keep students and staff as safe as possible. As with all our education settings, we will continue monitoring the situation closely, and we will follow the latest scientific advice, adapting policies as the situation changes. I know there has been some anxiety about the impact safety measures will have on the Christmas holidays. Students are important members of the communities that they choose to study in. We expect them to follow the same guidance as those same local communities. We are going to work with universities to make sure that all students are supported to return home safely and spend Christmas with their loved ones if they choose to do so. In this context, it's essential we put in place measures to ensure this can happen while minimising the risk of transmission. Where there are specific circumstances that warrant it, there may be a requirement for some students to self-isolate at the end of term, and we will be working with the sector to ensure this will be possible, including ending in-person learning early if that is deemed to be necessary. My department will publish this guidance shortly so that every student will be able to spend Christmas with their family. Where students choose to stay in their university accommodation over Christmas, universities should continue making sure they are safe and well looked after. Of course, it is inevitable there will be cases of COVID occurring in universities, just as there are in our wider communities and the constituencies that we represent. But, Mr. Speaker, we believe that universities are very well prepared to handle any outbreaks as they arise, and we have been working with the sector and Public Health England to make sure that they have every support and assistance they need should this happen. I have been impressed by the steps that our universities have been taking, working hand in glove with local authorities and local public health teams to safeguard students and staff. All our universities have local outbreak plans, and all of these have been discussed with local directors of public health. It is essential that we continue to allow our students to have face-to-face teaching wherever possible as part of a blended learning approach. I've heard the opposition call for all learning to move online. While online learning is a highly effective part of the learning experience, there are many courses, including medicine and dentistry, as well as the creative arts, which require a face-to-face element. That's why our guidance, published on the 11th of September, set out a tiered approach in higher education. Tiers enable a balance of face-to-face and online learning within the context of the COVID risk, and will operate alongside local restrictions that are placed on the wider community in the area that the university is in. I would now like to mention the latest position regarding testing for students. We've been working with DHSC to make sure that the testing capacity is sufficient and appropriate for universities, and I'm sure you'll be aware that DHSC has now launched the NHS COVID-19 app. The Department for Health and Social Care continues to make more testing available, and the vast majority of people can get a test locally. DHSC is also increasing the number of local testing sites and laboratories, adding new lighthouse laboratories in Newport and Charnwood to the national lab network, as well as additional walk-in centres being planned. Mr. Speaker, while we know that testing capacity is the highest that it has ever been, we are still seeing a significant demand for tests. So, like any other member of society, it is vitally important that staff and students at universities only get a test if they develop coronavirus symptoms, or if advised to do so by a clinician or a public health official. I'm aware that going to university can be a stressful time for some students, many of whom will be living away from their family and friends for the first time in their lives. This year will undoubtedly see added pressures because of the disruption and uncertainty caused by this global pandemic. And we must be mindful of how this will affect mental health and well-being of students. Many universities have bolstered existing mental health services and offer alternatives to face-to-face consultations. Once again, I'd like to thank staff at universities and colleges who have responded so quickly and creatively to the need to transform these essential services. We have asked universities to provide additional help and practical support to students as well. And I'm pleased to say that, Mr. Speaker, that universities are making sure students that are isolating are properly cared for and can access food, medical and cleaning supplies if needed. Student accommodation and support services will be a vital resource if any student has to isolate, and for students generally during this whole period of the pandemic. As well as providing support for those in halls of residence, will make sure students who live in houses of multiple occupation away from campus will still have access to advice and support if they need it. Universities are also able to call on £256 million provided by the government for hardship funding for students who have to isolate. Mr. Speaker, this government has taken a conscious decision to prioritise education. We know how fundamental a good education is to opportunity, to aspiration and to social mobility. That is why we opened schools and why over 99.8% of schools are now open, delivering education to our children. Delivering education and the opportunity to go to university is equally important for those youngsters who have left college or left school as well. We will never be in a position where we can eliminate all risk. But we will not condemn a generation of young people by asking them to put their lives on hold for months or years ahead. We believe that universities are very well prepared to handle any outbreaks as they arise, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State for Education, Kate.
I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and for advance sight of it. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad that after a decade of slashing funding to further education, the Conservatives have recognised that this is an important sector for life chances and for our economy, and I would like to work constructively with the Government to get this right. But their continued reliance on loans to fund education and the fact that the funding will not come on stream for many more months as we head for a crisis of unemployment are deeply concerning. Mr. Speaker, the situation as students return to university is desperately worrying. Across the country, many find themselves isolated in cramped accommodation. Parents are worried about their well-being and safety, and university staff who've worked so hard over the summer to prepare are anxious and angry that the government didn't keep its part of the bargain. They've all been let down by the government, just as it let down many of these same students with its handling of exam results last month. What students, staff and their families need now is reassurance. 19 days ago, the last time the Secretary of State commented on the situation at universities, he stressed the importance of delivering clear messages to students, and I hope he'll use the opportunity of answering my questions today to do that. Everybody knew that the return of students to universities would present significant challenges. SAGE warned of the impact weeks ago. What planning was put in place over the summer to ensure students would be able to return safely? Universities have stressed the importance of being able to work closely with local public health teams. So why did it take the Secretary of State and the Health Secretary until last Wednesday to write to local directors of public health about the return of university students? What is his message to those students who haven't yet moved to campus? They need clarity. Should they do so? What urgent steps is he taking to ensure that every student can get the best possible education, whether they're at home or on campus? How many students are currently unable to learn remotely because of a lack of digital access or devices? And what's the Secretary of State doing to address that? And what extra support will be given to students with special educational needs and disabilities? He's right that some courses require face-to-face teaching. But has he considered supporting universities to move all teaching online where this is possible, at least for this first term? For weeks now, Labour have warned the government that they must get a grip on testing and tracing if we're to reduce the spread of the virus, and the failure to do so lies at the root of this situation, and sorting it must be the government's top priority. In his statement, the Secretary of State said that only those with symptoms should try to get a test. That will leave many without symptoms in self-isolation in difficult circumstances. Can he tell us how many students, staff and members of the community around universities have symptoms but are waiting for a test? What is the local testing capacity in each community with a university? And is he confident that there will be sufficient if there's a spike in cases? Some universities have taken the lead where the government has failed and begun to develop their own testing capacity. What support is he offering to those institutions and to others who wish to do this? Mr. Speaker, we can't forget that at the heart of this crisis are thousands of young people, many away from home for the first time, many now isolated with a group of people who are practically strangers. We can only imagine how hard it is for them. The Secretary of State said he's asked universities to provide additional help, but beyond asking, what will his department be doing to help them? I'm glad he's listened to Labour and finally given a straight answer on reuniting students and their families over Christmas, but can he tell us why it took several days and repeated contradictions from his ministerial colleagues to do so? In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the crisis now threatening our universities was predictable, and it was predicted. Today, the Secretary of State failed to outline a plan to get testing fit for purpose, failed to commit that every student who needs access to remote learning will get it, and has no plan to ensure the future of our universities. If he doesn't get a grip, the situation we've seen in recent days could repeat itself across the country. Students will be unable to continue their studies, families will be concerned for their well-beings, and universities will face serious financial difficulties. And the Secretary of State will once again have let young people down as a result of his incompetence.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her questions. I'm glad that she welcomes the announcements on further education. The changes that we're wanting to drive in further education are absolutely vital in order to ensure that our country is in the right place to seize new opportunities now that we've exited from the European Union, and make sure our youngsters and people of all ages have the skills that they need to drive productivity in this country and ensure that they get the very most out of their lives. The Honourable Lady mentioned about, the advice from SAGE. Understandably, on top of the advice that we had issued on the 2nd of July on the return of universities and higher education institutions, we obviously wanted to update that advice following the conclusions of SAGE, which we did, taking into account the issues that they had raised and some of the suggestions that they had put forward. But also, SAGE warned about the impact of youngsters not going to university, of having that taken away from them, the opportunity to be able to return. And this is something that was recognised across all 4 nations of the United Kingdom, and recognised how important it is for youngsters to be able to go and study at university. The Honourable Lady raised an important point about digital access, and I'm sorry that she had missed the announcement of the fact that we had made £100 million available for universities to be able to use to ensure youngsters have digital access. Some of those students from the most deprived backgrounds that were maybe not in a position to be able to access courses is absolutely vitally important. Where we are in a situation, Mr. Speaker, where people will be having blended learning, that all students are able to access it, and taking very seriously some of the challenges that all students will face and universities face. That's why we have made £256 million available to make sure that where students are facing real hardship, that universities are able to access that funding in order to help them. I'd also like to thank my honourable friend, the Universities Minister, who's been in regular touch just over the last few days, where there has been a small number of universities which have seen a number of coronavirus cases, not uncommon as to what we have seen across communities right across the country, to make sure that they know we are there to support them and to give them any help that is required. But we mustn't forget that hundreds of thousands, almost 1 million students, have safely returned back to university over the last few weeks, and they will be able to start their studies and able to benefit from a brilliant world-class university education.
The Secretary of State confirmed that a proportionate response means this, that students have a right to their course and to face-to-face education. And all of us must take personal responsibility, including older people like myself. We cannot destroy the life chances of the young. If you're doing a history degree, you cannot be condemned to permanent online teaching. You might as well sit at home. Why have you paid all this money? And will he confirm that, of course, students, if they get ill, must self-isolate, but we cannot have these scenes of whole halls of residence being locked down. This is not the sort of university that we all want, a place of light and learning, not enforced lockdowns.
Mr. Speaker, we'd expect students to follow the same rules as we ask everyone within society to follow. Those who have been tested positive for COVID and those who have been in close contact, we'd understandably ask them to self-isolate. Universities are working very closely with local public health teams to ensure that that happens, but we always want to ensure there's a sensible and proportionate response to ensure that students are able to go about their business, continue on their learning, both online, but also importantly face-to-face as well.
We now head to Scotland with Cyril Monaghan, the SNP spokesperson. Cyril Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to start by declaring an interest. My son is currently at university, having to deal with online lessons, and my husband teaches in the university. Unfortunately, COVID is only one of the challenges currently facing universities, with a hard Brexit fast approaching. But I'd like to start by joining the Secretary of State in praising the steps that have been put in place by universities to keep staff and students safe, with both blended and online lessons and with mental health support. And I hope the Secretary of State will join me in recognising the support that has been given by individual universities, such as Glasgow, who will refund 1 month's rent for any student having to self-isolate in halls, and Dundee University, who are offering free accommodation to international students who are having to quarantine. But students and young people should not be blamed for the rise in cases. The vast majority are complying entirely with the guidance. But while Scottish students attend university in Scotland for free and therefore are not financially impacted by fees, students in England will pay over £9,000 for mostly an online education. This is clearly the time to reflect on the fee-paying structure of higher education and consider following Scotland's example of free higher education for all. So what discussions has he had with Cabinet colleagues on reducing fees and increasing the government funding to universities? Now, we know there have been issues in accessing tests in England, and this can become more acute for students who may not have the ability to travel to testing centres. So what steps is he taking to set up on-campus tests for students? Finally, in the Science and Technology Select Committee earlier this month, the Principal of Glasgow University, Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, described the R&D roadmap published by the government in July as a very high-level document that needed to be turned into a definitive plan very quickly, with clarity given on the government's exact plans for investment. Could the Secretary of State set out when details will be released on this roadmap?
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her many comments, and I know that both the University of Glasgow and Glasgow Caledonian, both neighbouring universities to her constituency, have been doing an awful lot of work welcoming students from all four parts of the United Kingdom and demonstrating how important the United Kingdom is for these all universities to be able to succeed in terms of a collaboration that we do across the board. I do thank her for putting forward policy suggestions for future Conservative Party manifestos. We want to ensure that actually universities are properly funded so that they're able to have world-class facilities that are able to beat any universities any place in the world, and I know there's also universities in Scotland also benefit from the UK finance system, as do Scottish students as well. In terms of test and trace, we continue to work closely.
Order. To the Secretary of State might be helpful. The questions are meant to come through me. Addressing the SNP Chief Whip isn't quite where we need to be. But please, if we can make sure that we are coming through the chair.
Mr. Speaker, I'd spent so long with the SNP Chief Whip. When we're Chief Whips together, I naturally gravitate to him and have a lovely conversation with him. And that was old habits die hard, Mr. Speaker. So I apologise about that. But, Mr. Speaker, and ignore the honourable member for Glasgow. But, Mr. Speaker, at every stage in terms of working with universities is recognising that we are dealing with a fluid situation. We're working with test and trace to make sure that there is availability for all students to be able to access testing at universities as close to where they're resident. I think that's
Raritan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know locally Keele University and Staffordshire University have been working extremely hard during the pandemic to support students. So would my right honourable friend agree that despite the current challenges we face, everything possible must be done to ensure students get as enriching an experience as possible this year?
Well, I'd like to pay tribute to those two great universities from Staffordshire, both the University of Staffordshire and the University of Keele, for all they've done to make sure that they give a warm welcome to all students, making sure that they are able to progress with their life chances and have the opportunity to learn, as what we want to see all youngsters to have that opportunity in all four nations of the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What we have seen this week on two halls of residence in Manchester, in my constituency, I'm afraid just about sums up everything that the government is getting wrong in handling this crisis. No planning over the summer and foresight. It was obvious that halls of residence would be the main area of risk. Confused messages that his own ministers can't even keep a track of, let alone 18-year-olds all arriving in our city from different parts of the country, and a woeful lack of quick testing which could have avoided this situation. So when is his government going to get a grip, especially of the testing regime, so that others don't have to face restrictions because he's lost control?
Well, the Honourable Lady is probably aware that we're doing more tests today than ever been done before, 225,000 tests every single day, increasing the amount of testing capacity to 500,000 by the end of next month, recognising the fact that this has to be targeted into areas of high need, such as the areas that the Honourable Lady's highlighted. But we will be asking, if the Honourable Lady is going to ask questions, she maybe wants to have the opportunity to hear the answer. But what we are asking students to do, we are asking students where they get tested and where there is a positive test for them to self-isolate. And as in the wider community, is those immediate contacts also self-isolate. But we do recognise how important it is for universities to be able to provide the support for those youngsters. And we touched upon it in my statement in terms of food and cleaning products and other support that may be available. And my honourable friend, the Universities Minister, was speaking to the Vice-Chancellor of Manchester Met just yesterday, making it clear the offer of support that we are there standing behind universities, helping them support their students, which is so critical. And I know it's something that a view that both she and I share.
Come to Mark Harper. Sorry,
Mr. Speaker, one of the things that I think has worried a lot of university students is the idea that if they are either test positive or a contact of someone that tests positive, they might have to self-isolate even over Christmas in their university accommodation. I'm glad the Secretary of State confirmed that we'll treat university students like everyone else. In the regulations yesterday, it confirms that you can self-isolate not just at your own home, but also at the home of a friend or family member, so you could return to your family home if that was appropriate. Can you confirm to reassure university students that they'll be able to do that and won't be trapped in their university accommodation for the period of self-isolation?
we're very conscious that there will be a lot of students that would, well, most students will not want to be in a position of being in university accommodation over the Christmas period. So what we'll be doing is setting out quite clearly as to how that will be avoided. So any students who do not want to be in that position will able to be at home with their loved ones, making sure that all students who want to return home are able to do so.
Mr.
Speaker, there are lots of very worrying reports that young people are scared, confused, isolated and vulnerable to mental ill health. So could the Minister please confirm specifically on what date he knew that some universities were planning to put groups of students in quarantine, and on what date specifically he first discussed asking them to put measures in place so that every student had access to mental health support?
The work in terms of mental health support started right at the start of this COVID crisis, making sure that we put measures to support students and the whole education community at the heart of what we do, and recognising the importance of dealing with mental health issues. And if we go back to the guidance issued on the 2nd of July and the guidance issued on the 11th of September, there was always a recognition that those people who are tested positive for COVID would need to self-isolate. Those people who have been in close contact with those who had tested positive, not dissimilar to what you'd see in workplaces and other education settings, would also have to isolate as a result of that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And following on from that, of course, for many young people, even in a normal year, this is a difficult time of transition, moving to independent study and living and managing finances, meeting new people, and all in unfamiliar surroundings. And a lot of great work is done by universities and the likes of Student Minds, for example. I wonder if my right honourable friend could say a little bit more about the support that is available and how it is being stepped up in universities and can be stepped up to fully support our young people.
Well, there is an amazing amount of work that is done by every single individual university, but there has also been a recognition by the Office for Students that there may be gaps, and that's why the Office for Students has stepped in to ensure that there's an ability where students find that there isn't that type of provision, that there is something that is provided for them so that no student is in a position of not being supported. And it's incredibly important that all students understand that there is the support available to them for them to be able to enjoy their time at university and succeed in their studies.
The climate of fear deliberately created by ministers and their advisers has done untold damage to individuals and to the economy as a whole, and has now hit students and universities with lock-ups of students, students being denied face-to-face education and unable to engage in the activities we normally associate with student life. And yet they're expected to pay the full price for this substandard opportunity in higher education. Does the Minister think it is fair that universities still hold on to the money paid by students when they are not offering the student experience which they promised? And maybe you could just clarify, was the direction the students couldn't go home at Christmas as a result of government guidance or a decision by universities themselves?
Well, as the honourable gentleman will know, that it was guidance issued by government and a decision of government, because obviously any actions that are taken have to be taken in the context of dealing with COVID right across the United Kingdom. And I'm sure that the Right Honourable Gentleman will have taken their time to read the guidance that we issued on the 11th of September and studied it in detail. And he'll have seen that there's the 4 tiers that we set out to ensure that students benefit from the maximum amount of learning face-to-face with their lecturers, to ensure that every student gets the very best experience that can be made available to them in all universities in England.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. And it's right that we are keeping universities such as University of Bolton open. What assurances can my right honourable friend give that efforts are being made to stymie perpetually enforced self-isolation within the student community? And secondly, warding off financial ruin caused by unsubstantiated scaremongering such as closing down Christmas for students?
I'd like to take the opportunity to pay tribute to the University of Bolton and all the work that they've been doing in order to be able to welcome the many thousands of students back to the University of Bolton. And of course, the University of Bolton plays an important role in terms of providing education, not just for students who have travelled internationally and across the country, but also locally as well to many young people. We will continue to work with the University of Bolton to ensure that actually people understand as to how the rules are applied, making sure that people understand that if they do have to isolate, who they are and how long they should be isolating for, but equally to understand that the many young people can go about their normal business, observing the restrictions and the courtesies that we ask all universities and all people within society to observe.
We're up to Bolton with Yasmin Qureshi. Yasmin Qureshi.
Mr. Speaker, what concrete action did the Secretary of State put into place over the summer to ensure that all students and staff requiring a COVID test will be able to have it?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we continue to work with the Department for Health and Social Care and Test and Trace to continue to expand the footprint of testing facilities. That's going to be increased to 500, making sure that all universities are in place of a walking distance of a testing centre, and many universities will be making available some of their facilities for testing centres to be placed in universities. We've also had assurances from the Department for Health and Social Care in terms of mobile testing facilities that will be made available if there are any local outbreaks and that is required.
Mr. Speaker, surely the right approach is that despite the virus, we all have to get on with our lives as best we can, and that includes students. Does my right honourable friend agree that starting the academic year on time was exactly the right decision, and that social distancing and isolation rules that apply to the rest of us need to apply to adult students, no more, no less?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. There should be the same set of rules across the board. But there is a real cost if we hadn't opened up our universities, as there is a cost to not opening up our schools. The cost isn't in money. The cost is in the missed opportunity. Those youngsters who want to study to be a doctor, a dentist, a nurse, a teacher. Those youngsters who want to train to become an engineer. By denying them the opportunity to be able to return, to be able to learn, to be able to have the opportunities that so many in this House have had, is doing them an injustice, and that is why it has been right to make sure that young people are able to come back to university and benefit from what so many members in this House have also benefited from.
Mr. Speaker, first-year students have already had to endure the government's chaotic handling of A-level results, and now the predictable campus outbreaks, but without sufficient testing or support in place, and the very distressing threat to them and their worried parents that they might not be able to return for Christmas. Can he clarify the point in his statement where he talks about ending learning early? Is he proposing now that students should have to all self-isolate at the end of term so they can return safely for Christmas? And if so, why not instead pursue mass testing with universities so that those students can safely go about their lives and return safely home?
Well, the Honourable Lady obviously listened to part of the statement, and where I said that all youngsters who want to be able to return home will be able to do so. But what we will look at is where there are specific cases, and the Right Honourable Lady will be fully aware that many universities, they have different times at which they end in order to be able to return for Christmas, but we'll be working with the university sector if there are specific cases and specific local circumstances where we would look at shifting to online learning solely in order to be able to ensure that all students are able to return in order to be able to have the benefit of being with their families for Christmas. But we envisage that to be a very small number of universities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad the Secretary of State confirmed that face-to-face learning will continue where possible. But in some cases, students will be paying full fees for what are now only online courses. Financial burden must be shared with universities, so can the Secretary of State ask the Office for Students to confirm and strongly advise that university bonuses should not be paid out unless fees are lowered?
My honourable friend raises an incredibly important point. We have had an issue of excessive Vice-Chancellor pay and bonuses for quite a long time. I'll be asking for the Office for Students to look at this and give very strong and clear steers on this matter to ensure that there aren't bonuses going out as a result of this crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I declare interest. My son has started university in the last week or so. He's not had to self-isolate yet, but a lot of his friends have. And I'll tell the Secretary of State what they're saying. They're saying this is exactly the same as the A-level debacle. It was completely predictable and completely avoidable. They've lost confidence in the Secretary of State in able to deliver safe education. So what can he say to them to ensure that they've got confidence moving forward? This pattern isn't going to be repeated for the next 6 months.
Well, I very much hope that the honourable member's son is enjoying his time at university and the opportunities as it will open up. We have always been clear that youngsters will be in a position, if they contract COVID, where they will have to self-isolate. We've also been clear that where students have been in close contact with people who have got COVID, they will also have to self-isolate. These are the rules that we're expecting everyone right across the country to be abiding by. So it is right that we also expect that of students. But what the honourable gentleman will see if he had taken the time to read the guidance that we've issued, both on the 2nd of July and the 11th of September, and the additional work and support we've made available to universities, we recognise that we're going to be challenged as a result of this. And that is why we've asked and worked with the university sector to reduce the risk as much as possible so that young people are able to have the benefits of university and they're not impacted, or we minimise the impact of COVID on their learning.
Let's head to Bexley Heath with Sir David Evaner. Sir David.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome my right honourable friend's statement. Education is essential for opportunity and social mobility, and the role of FE colleges is absolutely vital, as I'm sure he will endorse. Will he agree with me that it is right to prioritise education by keeping schools, colleges and universities open? For we cannot ask young people to put their lives on hold for months.
My right honourable friend is someone who has worked in the FE sector and feels so passionately about it, and the opportunities that not just further education but higher education and all schools provides all our youngsters, is absolutely right in advocating the importance of not just opening our universities but opening the schools and colleges at the earliest opportunity. And let's not forget, when we suggested of opening schools on the 1st of June, what did the party opposite do? But it opposed that opening. When we issued the guidance on the 2nd of July to see the full opening of all schools in September, what did the party do opposite? It opposed that. And of course, it doesn't come forward with positive suggestions, but it just tries to politicise a global pandemic, in the words of a lady opposite.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State presided over the GCSE and the A-level fiasco over the summer. Mr. Speaker, it was a dog's breakfast. And what he is doing now is not being able to guarantee students testing when they need it. Since March, the WHO called for testing, and yet this government has shown nothing but incompetence. Can the Secretary of State give a straight answer and guarantee that every student that needs a test will get it, instead of this fiasco that he's presided over right through the summer and failed to prepare and plan? He needs to do his job.
Well, as the honourable lady is probably aware, that in order to get testing you have to be symptomatic in order to be able to access testing. This is where the testing is most likely to produce the most accurate results. That's guidelines that are produced by the Department for Health and Social Care, and I'll be very happy for my office to forward on those guidelines so she can best understand them.
Let's head to Chesham and Amersham with Dame Cheryl Gillen. Dame Cheryl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement and also the Prime Minister's statement today? training and retraining has never been more important than in our now rapidly changing economy. But with parents worried about the costs of university accommodation, they often act as guarantors, and students about the heavy debt they have to repay after university, as well as now the paucity or even the trauma of their university experience due to lockdown. Would my right honourable friend now really champion the 2-year degree courses, such as those offered by our own excellent Buckingham University, which ensures academic excellence and achievement at a much lower cost to students and families?
Well, the pioneering work that's been undertaken by the University of Buckingham and their Vice-Chancellor, the brilliant Anthony Selden, who has done so much for education in this country, is really something to behold and something that I'd like to see more universities copying. But what we do need to do is ensure that young people understand that it is not only one option that's available to them at the age of 18, that the only way to succeed is by going to university. There are so many opportunities, whether that is pursuing an apprenticeship or even a degree apprenticeship, whether that is going on to some of our brilliant further education colleges. And expanding the breadth of that choice is one of the key missions of this party. We recognise this is how we'll level up opportunity for all youngsters in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In April, a UCU commissioned report on the impact of the COVID pandemic found the universities were facing a funding black hole of £2.5 billion in 2020-21, and students are still graduating with an average debt in excess of £50,000. Calls for an urgent sector-wide funding guarantee have fallen on deaf ears, and we now face the COVID crisis in the university sector, putting lives at risk. This was avoidable. Will the Secretary of State now listen and act on the advice of experts by making online learning accessible to all, enable students to go home without fear of financial penalty, and provide the sector and students with proper funding?
Well, the Honourable Lady is probably maybe not aware that we've taken a number of actions in order to be able to support the sector, whether that's through changes and improvements in terms of research funding, making sure that we continue to protect this vitally important scientific research base that we are truly a world leader in, making sure that the actions that we undertook before the summer to bring stability to the sector, working with Universities UK to ensure the profiling of money to them works best for universities to give them stability in order for them to be able to provide for young people, not just in England, but hopefully also having benefits in Wales as well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the Secretary of State and Universities Minister for their work to get students back to university as soon as possible. It is so important that students are able to continue with their studies with as little disruption as possible, and the university is the largest employer in Loughborough. I would therefore welcome their comments on the steps being taken to ensure that students can now safely remain on campus for the duration of their course.
Well, the wonderful work that the University of Loughborough has been undertaking, and of course one of the Times Guide's top 10 universities in the United Kingdom, is testament to the amazing work that is undertaken at the university. But, you know, she's absolutely right. Students want to go to university to get the very most out of the experience at university. And this is why the unprecedented measures that universities have taken to create a safe and secure environment so students can benefit from being at university all the way through the year is so important, and we'll continue to work with universities such as Loughborough to continue to provide that to all students.
Mentioned in his statement that face-to-face teaching should continue wherever possible within the context of COVID risk and local restrictions. Should local context or restrictions require universities to move teaching online completely, however, will the government ensure that neither they nor the students will be punished financially for doing the right thing?
We continue to work with the sector to ensure that there is the very best quality of teaching. If youngsters have issue with the quality of teaching, the Office for Students have made it absolutely clear that they will investigate this and they will take action where is required against universities that aren't delivering what's in their contract with students.
We now come to Maria Miller.
Can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement? And our fiercely independent universities are rapidly adapting to what is a very new way of operating, so that thousands of young people who've been hard hit by coronavirus can get on with their lives after 6 months of this pandemic. And I think they deserve all of our support. But many of those students may have planned to use the summer months to earn some money to support themselves through university, or indeed may have been looking for part-time work whilst they were studying as a way of making sure that they could support themselves through what are important years of their lives. I'm interested to hear from my right honourable friend what additional work universities are going to be doing to make sure that those students who are working hard might also be able to get the support they need if they hit financial hardship.
Well, quite rightly, both this government and the previous Labour government put a real high value of ensuring that students who started their studies were able to complete their studies. And it's something that we monitor and look at very closely as to how universities ensure that happens. We have worked with the Office of Students to ensure that there is hardship funding available. This is part of a £250 million package that was made available to universities so that proper assessment can be made of students if they require that support. And the Student Loans Company also offers a system where extra maintenance support can be available through individual assessment if a student chooses to go down that route.
Singh Desi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. While people can pin the Education Secretary for the exam results fiasco, they certainly cannot blame him for the shambolic privatised test and trace system, which is being personally led by the Prime Minister, his chief advisor, and the Health Secretary, which has put the lives of our young people and their families at risk. So given that many of us fear an increased university dropout rate among students, increased stress and mental health issues, can the Secretary of State promise that every student will have access to tests so that they can travel home safely, especially for Christmas?
Well, as we've made clear, we want to ensure that all students return home safely for Christmas, those who wish to do so. We feel very confident, and the university sector is very confident that the best way of keeping students and young people engaged in their studies is actually being part of the university community. And actually this will be an important step to ensure that we do not see high dropout rates. And as I touched upon, both his party and my party have always put a very high emphasis on the important need to ensure that youngsters do complete their studies, making sure the investment that they make, actually they do get something that is incredibly important and actually will put them in a good stead to achieve the very best in life. And we'll continue to work with the sector to give young people the support that's required in these much more challenging times than any of us would have thought we would have ever had to face.
Brendan Clark-Smith.
We're quite rightly proud that the UK attracts so many international students to come to our country every year to study. Could my right honourable friend tell me what steps his department is taking to support these students during these unprecedented times?
Well, we have been working very closely with the whole university sector to reach out to nations right across the world to make them understand not only do we have the best universities in the world, so many of the best research universities, so many of the best teaching universities, but also we offer a brilliant lived experience of being here in the United Kingdom and the opportunity of post-study visas, which are incredibly important. But we've also been working with the Home Office to ensure that visa applications are done well and quickly, and also ensuring that we have a campaign reaching out into those nations, making sure that youngsters there understand this is a great country to study in.
Secretary of State said, most university courses this academic year will now involve a blend of online and face-to-face teaching, but it's clear that those proportions may change in response to circumstances. An informal survey conducted by Disabled Students UK shows that changing learning setups can cause anxiety and fatigue. Many disabled students also experience issues with pre-existing conditions flaring up when they're adjusting to a new study environment, and excessive screen time can be problematic for people with some conditions. Disabled students and those with chronic conditions may also be more fearful of attending in-person classes. Can the Secretary of State assure the House that every student has the equipment and support they need to learn remotely, and that the needs of disabled students are not an afterthought?
The Honourable Lady rightly raises a very important point, and under equalities legislation there is a duty on universities to ensure that there is for proper and fair provision for all students. And that's what we'd expect from all universities. I wonder if the Honourable Lady would be kind enough to share with me the details of the survey. And I know that my Honourable friend, the Minister for Universities, would very much like to follow that up with a sort of meeting with her to discuss that in more detail. I think, you know, as we've touched upon in terms of the availability of devices and the £100 million fund, I would certainly hope that, you know, youngsters who are suffering a disability would be a top priority for any university, but I look forward to my honourable friend taking that further with discussions with her and hopefully offering her full and total reassurance on that matter.
And Bradley.
Mr. Speaker, much has been made of the short-term impact on students and on universities, but there is a long-term impact too. We've known for a while that for increasing numbers of university students, the graduate outcomes at the end are not great. This health crisis is only going to exacerbate that problem. So will my honourable friend, right honourable friend, take this opportunity to examine the choices that we're offering to young people as they leave school and what the proper role for universities in our education system might be?
Well, my honourable friend knows very well that while I'm a passionate advocate for universities, I cannot help feeling that we must never ignore the great opportunities that are offered through our further education colleges and through apprenticeship routes. This has for far too long been an area that has been ignored. We need to see changes, we need to see improvement, and we've got to make sure young people realise these opportunities are as good, and in some cases much better, than sometimes going to university. That's what we're looking at delivering and what we're going to deliver as part of this government's agenda.
Let's head up to Leeds with Richard Bergen. Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The blame for the coronavirus outbreak on campuses lies squarely with the government's decision to ignore its own evidence, warning that face-to-face teaching and halls of residences were areas of risk. Independent SAGE has called for all teaching to be moved online, as has the UCU University Staff Union. By choosing not to do so, isn't the government putting students and staff safety at risk simply to uphold a broken university model, as it fears that online teaching would lead to demands for fee or rent refunds?
It's always very grateful to get a direct question from the UCU, but I can assure the honourable gentleman that that isn't the case.
We now come to Richard Holden.
Speaker, schools, FE colleges and universities in and around my North West Durham constituency are doing all they can to get great positive education outcomes for the young people that they're looking after in these difficult times. Will the Secretary of State confirm that he'll be devoting 100% of his efforts to the education of Britain's children and young people, rather than seeing the global coronavirus pandemic as a good crisis and an opportunity to score political points, which is sadly the stated position of the opposition front bench?
Well, I certainly know that my honourable friend is putting 100% in terms of representing his constituents in Durham North West and making sure that their voice is heard in this chamber. And whether it's driving changes and improvements at Derwentsside College to make sure that youngsters get the very best opportunity when far too often it had been neglected in the past. But he is absolutely right. This side of the House is 100% committed to making sure young people get the very best in education, as against constantly taking the line of trade unions and trying to find excuses not to do things.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Secretary for his reply so far. Would the Education Minister outline what has been done in tandem with hospitals to ensure that fourth-year medical students are able to get a hands-on practice, bearing in mind that many are reporting they're being excluded from normal mentoring and in-room observation due to social distancing protocols? How will the Minister ensure that doctors of the future have the complete rounded education that is vital for their ability to practice medicine? Thank you.
This is something that's incredibly vital, and vital for all 4 nations of the United Kingdom. We've been doing a lot of work with the Department for Health to ensure that that is made available to all medical students here in England. I will take up this issue again with the Secretary of State for Health, as well as the devolved Health Minister in Northern Ireland as well, to ensure that that's been delivered. Because if we want to have and if we want to continue to ensure that we have a world-class NHS, we've got to ensure that pipeline of brilliant doctors and brilliant nurses and clinicians are continued to be provided for them through our universities.
Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am delighted to have Imperial College partly in my constituency. Will my right honourable friend assure me that he will give all the support needed to our world-class educational establishments, and that we will do everything to ensure that our students get as normal an education as possible in these difficult circumstances?
Well, Imperial College is one of those great shining lights of our university sector that around the world is known for its excellence. And my honourable friend just visited Imperial College just the other week and saw firsthand not only some of the measures it was putting in place to ensure that students could return safely, but also some of its world-leading work that gives it the rightful reputation it has. It's really important that we continue to work with the sector to do everything that is possible to ensure students have the quality of experience, but most importantly are in a position to continue to benefit from the brilliant learning and research that is the very heart of great universities such as Imperial.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. It was the Health Secretary's refusal last week to rule out students not being able to return home for Christmas that caused a great deal of distress to students and indeed to parents. So the Secretary of State's very clear statement today that students will be able to go home will be welcomed. Can I, however, bring him back to the question put to him by the Right Honourable Member for the Forest of Dean, which I don't think he quite answered. Under the current rules, can students go home to self-isolate?
What we'll be doing is we'll be setting out clear guidance in terms of students and making sure that that fits within the broader guidance right across the country that is available for the wider population as well.
Speaker, as my right honourable friend knows, education is fundamental to improving opportunities and driving social mobility, and it is right that he has done all he can to reopen education. However, many parents in Darlington are concerned that their children will not be able to return home for Christmas. And whilst we welcome his announcement today, can I urge my right honourable friend to do all he can to ensure that the fear of missing out on Christmas does not jeopardise our students' first term?
We all know the importance that we all place in terms of being with our families at Christmas. And that's why it's absolutely vital that we set out very clearly that this is something that we're going to ensure that all students are able to do this Christmas. We do have to set that within the context of what is happening nationally, and that's why we'll work with the Department for Health and the university sector to ensure that that is the case, so that all those youngsters who are currently studying, who want to be able to return to their loved ones, are able to do, not just in Darlington, but right around the country.
Speaker, the Secretary of State says that his government prioritises education and that he stands behind universities, but he knows that the only financial support the sector has received is to address the shortfall in scientific research funding. Critically important, but it does not impact the learning experience. So will he specify the support Newcastle University in my constituency will receive in order to ensure that 30,000 students receive a supportive, safe, educational experience in a city with the second highest coronavirus infection rate in the country?
It's sort of spelt out in the statement the £256 million that was made available in order for universities to be able to support students, in order to be able for them to continue their studies. We also did the reprofiling of student loans in order to be able to support them and continuously worked with the sector. But we've also set up a restructuring regime for those universities that are facing financial hardship and difficulty, for them to be able to work with us in order for them to be able, for us to be able to support them.
Bell.
Mr. Speaker, 2,500 new and returning students went to Keele campus in my constituency in the last week, all accommodated in small and tightly defined households. And the Vice-Chancellor, I'm pleased to say, reports no significant issues so far. So will he join me in welcoming these students to Newcastle-under-Lyme, to Staffordshire? Will he welcome the sensible approach of Keele University and their blended approach to learning, including face-to-face teaching? And will he set out what measures his department has taken to alleviate any concerns that staff and students have, given the recent rise in COVID cases?
Well, we all recognise that we are operating in quite unique circumstances where we are seeing a rise in the number of coronavirus cases. But the work of Keele University, setting out clear policies in order to be able to welcome students back safely and into a warm and friendly environment, is so important and so critical, because he, like I, wants to ensure that universities are able to benefit from that brilliant experience of studying at Keele and being able to continue to make Keele one of those great universities to be able to study at.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Students are asking why they have been sent to university halls only to be locked in their rooms and to rightly receive online teaching. The University and College Union and the National Union of Students warned what would happen, but the government ignored them. One answer, Mr. Speaker, maybe a cynical answer, is that the marketised higher education system needed students to return. It needed their tuition fees, it needed their rent, and that's why student welfare has been sacrificed. So I ask, is the cynic right, or is this straightforward government incompetence?
I find the Honourable Lady's question I know that the Honourable Lady is obviously feels very passionately about this, but what we want to see is actually youngsters to be able to go back to university, to be able to benefit from education, be able to benefit from learning. And the Honourable Lady is equally aware that it is not just students that, if they're displaying symptoms, that have to get tests and may have to self-isolate. It's not just those who've got in contact with those students, it's actually the whole of society. It's something that we're having to deal with as a nation, and that is what is so important. And we cannot be having one rule for students and another rule for the rest of the population, and it is right approach to do to ensure that we continue to do everything we can do to control this virus.
Gavin Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome what my right honourable friend said about supporting the mental health of students at this time. Can I also encourage him to ensure they support the employability skills of students, which could easily get neglected with online sessions? Even if it's only online, let's keep them on track for the lives they want after university.
It is a key metric that we're always looking at as to what universities are doing to ensure that students don't just learn, but are in a position to be able to benefit from that learning and from that study to bring it into the world of work. This is not something that we should see neglected at this time, but rather something that there should be a greater emphasis on, because what is the point if people are going to university and not given the tools to be able to enter work, to enter employment, and able to fulfil their dreams and ambitions in the work that they're able to get on the back of a degree that they have been able to achieve?
Mr. Speaker, students from my constituency of Enfield Southgate and elsewhere who are away at university for the first time are being put in the impossible situation of facing huge restrictions on their education and social life, but still expected to pay full fees and rent. This is both grossly unjust and unfair. So can the Secretary of State tell me what plans the government have to address this issue?
As I'm sure that the Honourable Gentleman will be aware that anyone who is in a position where they haven't been receiving what they should have been receiving in terms of the education and the support from the university can, through the Office for Students, be able to make that complaint. And if they aren't getting the support and they're not getting the study that they should be entitled to as part of their contract, they are entitled to be reimbursed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome my right honourable friend's statement, and I would like to say that both in Staffordshire University and Keele University are important local employers to the area of Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Tork, as well as a vital lifeline to the local economy of Stoke-on-Trent, Kidsgrove, Tork, Newcastle and Lyme and where else across North Staffordshire. So will you agree with me that this is why it's important that face-to-face learning, bringing students back to university, is also important so local economies can thrive?
We all recognise the important role that universities play, not just in terms of a direct employment, but in terms of the innovation that they bring to communities, for research that they do that often supports local business, but also training those people with the skills so that they can enter the workforce, not here in London, but in Stoke, in Tork, in Kidsgrove, and many other areas right across North Staffordshire as well. They're an important local employer, but they're an important part of economic regeneration for many areas up and down the country.
Let's head to Motherwell with Marion Fellows. Marion Fellows.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Young people have borne a heavy burden throughout this pandemic, financially, emotionally, through loss of education, and now with a disrupted return to university. Will the Secretary of State use his position to advocate that young people should not also bear the burden of paying for this crisis through fees and accommodation costs for the rest of their lives?
Can I reassure the Honourable Lady that this government isn't going to treat students like the SNP government did in Scotland, in terms of treating them like a different set of citizens and putting a different set of restrictions on them than the wider community, because we recognise that we should be treating people fairly and equally, so we won't make the mistakes that the SNP did.
You, Merriman.
Mr. Speaker, can I start by thanking you for getting all the way through this call list to me as bottom of the class. And can I ask the Secretary of State to inject some positivity into this chamber? Going to university is the most amazing opportunity. Yes, it will be different this year, but our young people are durable, they're flexible, and they will take this opportunity that is afforded to them in the way that generations before them have. So can I ask him to conclude by sending out a message that it's these young people that are going to power our future generations in economy through these very difficult times?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think you'll agree with me that the Honourable Gentleman deserves a first-class degree for that question, and he is absolutely right in saying that university students, yes, they are going to be facing a different set of circumstances, but going to university opens up so many doors and so many opportunities, not just in terms of the study that they'll do, not just in terms of what they'll learn, but also in terms of the opportunities and friendships that they will forge over their period of study.
Not quite finished yet. Got the chair of the Select Committee to come, Robert Halford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Much appreciated. I strongly welcome the announcement today on skills. I think that is a remarkable announcement. We should all be celebrating that today. And I thank the work that both my right honourable friend and the Universities Minister are doing on universities. There are 3,000 students roughly in lockdown at the moment. All I ask my right honourable friend that if that number grows dramatically, 10, 15, 20,000, that he reviews the current policy that he set out today. But could I ask him specifically about a long-term issue that has been exposed by the coronavirus? In terms of state school pupils, 45% go to higher education. Free school meal pupils, 26% go, and white working class boys on free school meals, just 13% go. So what is my right honourable friend doing, and the University Minister, to reverse that and make sure that more white working class boys and girls go to university?
Excellent question.
Well, I know that there is few people in the House that can match my right honourable friend for being such a staunch and consistent advocate for further technical high-quality education, whether that's through our further education colleges, whether that's through apprenticeships, whether that's through independent learning providers. And he truly is an inspiration, not just to me, but to so many of us, to make sure that we provide that for young people in the future. My right honourable friend rightly says that this is something that we need to constantly keep under review in terms of the university situation. We'll constantly work with the sector very closely to ensure that we adapt and support them if the pandemic means that we have to make changes. But on the issue about why there's just not enough youngsters who have free school meals or white working class boys going to university, this is a real issue. We need to see change. We need to look at different options to ensure that those youngsters realise that they can succeed as well as university as all those other youngsters that choose to go, and we will ensure that we deliver it as we level up across the country over the coming years.
Sir Robert Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wish to raise what I submit is an important issue concerning the extent and interpretation of the Law Officers' Convention in relation to questions and answers given in this House. On Thursday, last week, I asked the Attorney General for information as to what support that she had had from officials and Treasury Council and others in relation to the preparation of a statement of the government's legal position in relation to the UK Internal Markets Bill and the Withdrawal Agreement, which was published to Select Committee chairs on the 10th of September. The Attorney declined to give me a substantive answer to that question, relying upon the Convention. I'd submit, Mr. Speaker, that it's very clear from Erskine May that the application of the Convention is strictly and deliberately circumscribed so as to limit it to protect the giving of legal advice or opinions by the law officers to the government. I'd submit, Mr. Speaker, that the publication of a statement of the government's opinion as to the legal position cannot be advice given to government, and therefore the Convention cannot apply to it. If that be the case, I'd ask for your guidance that the Attorney was not within order in relying upon the Convention, and I'll see your guidance as to how I might then elicit the information that I was seeking.
I must thank you for that point of order. I am grateful to the honourable member for the point of order and for giving me notice of it, thank goodness. Ministers, of course, responsible for the answers that they give, but I can help the honourable member in some respects. It seems to me that he states the Convention as reflected in the Ministerial Code accurately. A law officer can choose to make their advice public, as has happened in the instance to which he refers, and as my predecessors have ruled, the rules of the House are in no way involved should they choose to do so, as according to Erskine May. It is out of order to ask a question which seeks an opinion on a question of law, but I can confirm that the question that the honourable member asked did not infringe that rule. He is quite entitled to table further questions to pursue what he considers to be an unsatisfactory answer, and I have no doubt expect him to do so with great urgency. A point of order, Gregory Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if you can advise the House if the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland has given an indication of coming before the House to make a statement regarding the announcement this morning of the Prosecution Service in Northern Ireland, who announced that there would be no further prosecutions of soldiers in relation to the events known as Bloody Sunday. The outcome of that has been that campaigners are now indicating, even though it is almost 50 years after the event, that they seek to, and they intend to seek a judicial review into these issues, rather than the police officers who were murdered 3 days before Bloody Sunday, who have never been investigated into or inquired into at all.
They should do both.
Can I say I am grateful for the Honourable giving me notice of intention to raise this matter. As you know, it's not a point of order for the Chair, but the House and the Government of the Front Bench in particular will have heard what he's had to say. I would be disappointed if there isn't a statement coming forward on this very important matter. I think it is very, very important to the House, and that information should be coming here. Right, no further points of order. I am now going to ensure that we have the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business and the safe arrival of those participating in the next. I am now suspending the House for 3 minutes. Order.
You ready, Tommy? Order, order. 10-minute rule motion. Tommy Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill on problem drug use as set out on the order paper. Mr Deputy Speaker, this pandemic has shone a spotlight on many of the problems we face as a society, but it has also diverted our attention from many other pressing social problems. One of those is the question of problematic drug use, which afflicts every community in every part of this land. Thousands of people are losing their lives. Tens of thousands have their lives and their health blighted, and hundreds of thousands of people living in our communities are compromised, have their lives compromised by the effects of this problem. And yet, the big problem we have, Mr Deputy Speaker, is that the principal piece of legislation that we look to govern this area, the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act, is simply not fit for purpose. In fact, worse than that, it is a hindrance to taking action and compounds the very problems that we perceive. It does this in a number of ways. First of all, by criminalising this entire area in terms of the production, distribution, supply and consumption of drugs. It takes any concept of regulation or control and places that firmly in the hands of organised crime rather than public agencies. Secondly, by stigmatising and criminalising the end user, it makes it very, very difficult for anyone caught up in this problem to seek help. They are often torn between the threats of violence from their supplier and the threat of arrest and detention from the police. Thirdly, Mr Deputy Speaker, it compromises the ability of health service workers to intervene and do something about the problem, in many cases
placing them at threat of prosecution as well. And fourthly and finally, it shrouds this entire area in ignorance and a lack of information, so that we cannot shine a light onto the problem and decide what to do with it. It is nearly 50 years since that Act was passed, and I can think of no other piece of legislation relating to social policy which has remained unreformed and unreviewed for half a century. And the case for reform is all the more compelling when we consider that the scale and nature of the problem we face today is so much different than that faced by our predecessors at the end of the 1960s. Drugs have changed. There are more people using them, and we know far more now about what to do with them than ever before. So that is why we should have a comprehensive review of drugs legislation, and I hope and I pray that the government will see the wisdom of doing that at some stage in the near future, and that it will move away from an approach based on criminalisation and prohibition and towards one based on compassion and regulation. But that is not what today is about. That is not what the bill before the House today is about. I do not seek to overturn the 71 Act, nor indeed to amend it. I seek to bring in additional specific measures which will deal with the problems that are right in front of us today. And the first thing we need to do in discussing this whole area is to realise that this is not a new problem. Narcotics have existed for as long as we have. They were there in the past, they will be there in the future. Ever since human beings grew legs, we have been chewing leaves or drinking potions in an attempt to combat pain or overcome boredom. Now, for some, that is a response to dramatic and poor conditions in their lives, but to others, it is simply part of the curiosity inherent in human nature. And we understand much more than we used to about the science behind this problem, and it is still developing. But we know this at least. We know that the problem of drug addiction in our society is principally to do with biochemistry. It is not a moral question about right or wrong. What is happening is not to do with the actions of some aberrant individuals who are deciding to be bad. It is a social problem about how we interact with our world and our environment. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when people like me make these arguments, there are usually two arguments that are thrown against us. The first is to say that the drug problems in society are a result of many other social ills. The incohesion that we have in our society, the poverty, the inequality, the abuse, the violence, the mental health crisis we have, all of these are the things that we should be concentrating on, and we are misplacing our energy if we simply talk about reforming drug laws. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know of no one on this side of the argument who doesn't call for radical change in social policy to try and overcome the policies that we are afflicted by. But I have to say it is a false choice to present this as either you do that or you reform drugs legislation. We need to do both. Because the fact of the matter is that whilst in many cases these social problems are the consequences of drug addiction, in some cases they are also the causes of them too, and there is an interrelationship that must be addressed. Absolutely. The second thing that is argued when people like me say things like this are that we are going soft on drugs. To use the Home Office's phrase, we're giving the wrong impression, as if somehow reforming the criminal law in this matter would encourage drug consumption or addiction or problematic drug use. The problem with that argument, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is not only that there is not a shred of evidence to support it, there is abundant evidence to support the opposite point of view. Over the last 20 years, there have been many countries which have had often radical and dramatic changes in the legal framework that surrounds drugs. In not one single instance has this led to an increase in the problem. Everywhere, it has led to a reduction in the problem. Fewer users, fewer drugs, fewer deaths, fewer demands on law enforcement. That is the fact of the matter across the world. In Portugal today, which has taken serious action, probably more than any other European country, 4 people for every million of the population die from problem drug use. 4 people per million. The figure in the United Kingdom is 85 people per million. Now, that should mean that we do something about it, and I hope very much that we will. To turn to some of the specifics in the bill, much of this debate has talked about drug consumption rooms, and I want to be very clear just how irritated and frustrated I become when some people refer to these glibly as shooting galleries, as if they were a site of entertainment or relaxation. I have visited these facilities in Canada, Germany, and in Portugal, and I can tell you they are as far away from anyone's concept of recreation as it is possible to get. They also, I understand, some people just don't understand it. They don't understand how it can be that by providing a facility to help people, to allow people to take their own drugs, how can that be in any way helping them? Surely we should be intervening with rehabilitation. Surely we should be offering them help and advice. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the people that say that misunderstand the problem and they misunderstand this proposal. You cannot give advice to a dead person. This proposal and the facilities of drug treatment rooms and drug consumption rooms are about keeping people alive today so that we can make those interventions tomorrow. They are, in effect, overdose prevention centres. Because this entire matter is shrouded in the criminal law, most of the 5,546 people who died from this problem last year, most of them died alone behind closed doors. And they died unintentionally because by the time they realised something was wrong, it was too late to call for help. But the horror, the real horror, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is not the deaths. It is the fact that they are entirely preventable if we choose to bring this whole area into the light and look at it seriously. In my last minute, I want to address how policy is made in this Parliament. We have a select committee system where committees of members are set up to scrutinise areas of legislation and executive action. Over the last year, both the Scottish Affairs and the Health Select Committee have done exactly this in this field. They have brought forward experts, they have studied the matter in detail, and they have made, independently of each other, the same recommendations which reflect the proposals on the face of this bill. And the response of the government has been woeful to reject these recommendations out of hand. And I say to the government, this matter will not go away. You cannot keep your head in the sand. Take it out and tell us what the alternative is. And if the UK government is incapable of acting as a state on this problem, then give the capacity and the power to the devolved administrations so that the countries of this land can learn from each other. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move.
I've had no indication that anybody intends to oppose this particular motion, so I intend to put the question. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, Ronnie Cowan, Alison Thewlis, Tonya Antonazzi, Clive Lewis, Ben Lake, Caroline Lucas, Crispin Blunt, Graham Morris, Jeff Smith, Wendy Chamberlain, Pete Wishart and myself.
Tommy Shepherd.
Problem drug use bill.
Second reading what day?
13th of November 2020.
13th of December 2020.
13th of November.
13th of November 2020. Thank you very much. We now come to motion number 2 on public health. Minister to move formally.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to United Kingdom Internal Market Bill Programme number 2, and I inform the House that I have not selected the amendment to the programme motion, and I call a minister to move the motion.
To move.
The question is the United Kingdom Internal Market Bill Programme number 2 motion as on the order paper. Anybody seeking to speak? In which case, the question is the United Kingdom Internal Market Bill Programme number 2 motion as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.
United Kingdom Internal Market Bill, as amended in Committee of the House, to be considered.
Now.
I've not selected the recommittal motion in the name of Ian Blackford, and we start with new clause 4, with which it will be convenient to consider the other selected new clauses, amendments and new schedules as listed on the selection paper. I call Minister Paul Scully to move new clause 4.
Thank you, Mr Evans, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to begin by thanking all the members so far for their engagement throughout the passage of the bill, and to the Public Bill Office for their excellent work supporting members and officials on this bill. Before I turn to the specific amendments that will be debated today, I just wanted to briefly remind members of the House why it's crucial that we pass this bill. Around 60% of Scottish and Welsh exports are to the rest of the UK, which is around 3 times as much as exports to the whole of the rest of the EU. About 50% of Northern Ireland sales are to Great Britain. In some local authorities in Wales, over a quarter of workers commute across the border. Mr Deputy Speaker, when we leave the transition period at the end of this year and laws made in Europe can now be made in the UK,
Grateful to the Minister for giving way. He will have noticed yesterday that the Scottish Government declared its intention not to give this bill a legislative consent motion. Does he intend to ignore it or dismiss it? And does he hold Scottish democracy in contempt?
I clearly hold the devolution settlement very much not in contempt. It's right that we actually work together, but I do believe that the UK is stronger together, and it's important that we give Scottish businesses, just as much as Welsh businesses, Northern Irish businesses and English businesses, the certainty that they want to be able to trade. So we'll continue to engage with the Scottish Parliament and officials and politicians up there to achieve legislative consent. But Mr Deputy Speaker, as this happens, as we get the hundreds of powers flowing from the EU to the devolved nations and the UK government in that unprecedented transfer, and as we recover from COVID, we must ensure that our economy is stronger than ever. And that's why the government has introduced this bill, and why it's essential that we pass it. We want to guarantee the continuing function of our internal market to ensure that trade remains unhindered in the UK for the future. Now, turning to the amendments, I'll begin by speaking to the amendments tabled in the name of my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State. I'd first like to discuss the amendments strengthening the bill's measures relating to the governance and functioning of the Office for the Internal Market. And this office will sit within the Competition and Markets Authority to monitor and report on the internal market on an equal basis for all administrations. The Competition and Markets Authority has a strong reputation for independence and impartiality. That reputation is something that the government has strived to preserve in setting out the functions to be carried out by the Office for the Internal Market. By providing non-binding expert reporting and technical monitoring on regulations and proposals, it will provide robust evidence on the actual or potential impact of regulatory measures. New Clause 4 gives it the objective of supporting the effective operation of the UK internal market through the provision of economic and technical advice and expertise. This will exist in parallel to the existing objective of the Competition and Markets Authority to promote competition for the benefit of consumers. New Clause 5 enables Competition and Markets Authority functions under Part 4 of the bill to be carried out by the Office for the Internal Market task groups, and introduces a new schedule setting out the governance arrangements for the Office of the Internal Market panel and task groups. This mirrors the existing arrangements for establishment of panels and groups that it has in place. New Schedule 1 establishes a panel of experts to lead the work of the Office for Internal Market. The Secretary of State will appoint a chair and further members following consultation with ministers from all 3 devolved administrations. I'd like to give way.
Will you confirm that the arrangements under the bill regarding the CMA guarantee that we will not have any jurisdiction by the European Union or the European Court over the CMA, and furthermore, that one of the cardinal principles on which the European Union and Commission are taking their stand is that they will insist that we should not benefit competitively from leaving the European Union, and we should not be able to compete with them on reasonable terms?
I'm grateful for that very typically wise intervention, and I'm happy to provide that confirmation. Amendment 1 provides absolute privilege against defamation for the Competitions and Markets Authority when carrying out its functions under Part 4. This will ensure that it will report and provide advice independently without needing to expend resources on preparing to defend litigation, and ensures that businesses with deep pockets aren't able to sue or threaten to sue the CMA to obstruct it from carrying out its functions. I'd now like to set out briefly for the House as amendments which will improve the drafting of the bill. Through amendments 31 to 34, we're taking the opportunity to put beyond any possible doubt that the minimum unit alcohol pricing type regulation, any other manner of sales requirements, are not in the scope of the mutual recognition principle, unless they amount in practice to a total ban on a good being sold. I know this is something that came up in committee stage, and we want to make sure that we can, rather than politicking, we can return this to a business continuity approach.
Grateful for the Minister for giving way. He's just told us about an amendment to take into account concerns about the minimum unit pricing aspect, but UK government ministers have been telling us for weeks this bill doesn't affect that minimum unit pricing, yet here it is. So clearly it has been a concern up until now, and we were right. Isn't it also true, though, that the non-discriminatory aspects of that amendment just make this completely useless anyway?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that, but no, what we've done with this is that in order to make sure that we can take this totally off the table as a political football, and actually return this bill to what it's absolutely designed to be, what we've always designed it to be, and that's that business continuity to give Scottish businesses as well as businesses from all parts of the UK the certainty that they need without these sort of distractions. So the technical amendment makes sure dots the I's and crosses the T's on that. Amendments 2 to 11, 24, 27, 28. Yeah, I'm happy to give one.
I thank the Minister for giving me the intervention. Does the Minister agree that for Northern Ireland to be a successful part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, that there is work to work with us in this new Clause 7? Can I gently suggest to the Minister new Clause 7 that our party is putting forward will ensure that that happens? It's an imperative tool to ensure that Northern Ireland is not left behind in Brexit in terms of being an integrated member of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. In other words, we treat it equally and as everybody else is.
I thank the honourable gentleman, and he will see. I'll turn to new clause 7 in a second, but clearly we will treat Northern Ireland equally. Amendments 2 to 11, 24, 27, 28 and 35 to 38 are technical changes that remove sources of potential confusion in the drafting. Amendments 19 and 21 provide a fuller clarification that a wide range of agricultural processes that are considered to be in scope when we refer to the production of goods. Amendment 20 ensures that both the UK Government and devolved administrations can continue responding to specific biosecurity threats arising from the movements of animals, and high-risk plants are excluded from the mutual recognition and non-discrimination principles of the bill. Amendments 22 and 23 clarify the meaning of Clause 16, that a change to the conditions attached to an authorisation requirement would bring it into scope of Part 2 of this bill. Amendment 26 ensures that the exemption in Clause 23 covers the replication of non-statutory rules as well as the reenactment of legislation. Amendments 12 to 15 ensure that the higher courts in England and Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland may make declarations of incompatibility in respect of their regulations under Clause 42 or 43, but may not quash them. This will ensure that in the unlikely event of violation of convention rights, there is a remedy available through the courts.
Notwithstanding the terms of Amendments 12 and 13, can the Minister tell us whether the Secretary of State continues to be confident that the statement he's made in terms of Section 19(1)(a) of the Human Rights Act is accurate?
Well, we've been quite clear in the approach that we've taken in terms of the human rights impact on this, and so I'm confident that the Secretary of State, in talking about that, this, for the reasons that I've set out, I hope that honourable and right honourable members will be able to feel able to support. Happy to give way.
Can I just press the Minister a little further in relation to Amendments 13 and so on? What is the rationale for, I accept preserving a remedy, but a remedy by way of a declaration of incompatibility, as opposed to removing any offensive regulation in domestic law? It's a much harder burden, a much harder set of obstacles for a litigant an aggrieved person to go through it, to have to go and get a declaration of incompatibility. What is the compelling reason for adopting this unusual approach?
I think this achieves the right balance in terms of as I say, having the remedy for to make sure that if in that unlikely event, but there is an unlikely event of convention rights for the reason that I've covered in terms of our impact assessment on human rights. But I do hope that honourable and right honourable members will feel able to support these important but mainly technical amendments. I'm going to move on to the opposition amendments because I think this is important that we give that due care and attention. But I do want to just remind honourable members of the core purpose of the bill as set out before I cover those. It puts into law a market access commitment by enshrining the principles of mutual recognition and non-discrimination in the law. That means that goods and services from one part of the UK will be recognised across the country, and it will ensure that there's equal opportunity for all UK-based companies trading in the UK. But I want to turn to new clause 2, which would place an obligation on UK ministers to seek to agree a framework covering the UK internal market, which would need to be taken into account in the exercise of financial assistance powers. The amendment would fundamentally alter the basis on which common frameworks are developed and wouldn't be in line with the design of common frameworks which was agreed by the UK government and devolved administrations. The principles agreed make clear that the common frameworks are based on consensus rather than legislation, as we've covered rather than legislation, as we discussed at committee stage at length. The principles also set out that common frameworks are limited in their scope to powers returning from the EU, which have a devolved intersect. An overarching framework would not materially contribute to effective joint working between the United Kingdom government and devolved administrations. Through the Common Frameworks programme, we're agreeing mechanisms for effective intergovernmental working. These cover many areas engaged by provisions in the bill for the internal market. We're also developing proposals for an enhanced intergovernmental relations system, which will support work to maintain policy coherence across the United Kingdom. Now, this collaborative model is likely to be more effective and provide greater clarity than the process set out in the new clause, which doesn't clearly define when the duty in subsection 1 and the due regard duty in subsection 3 would be met. Common frameworks are designed to allow for collaborative and flexible working between United Kingdom government and the devolved administrations. Creating a framework such as this, which is underpinned by obligations in law, could undermine that effective joint work. I'd like to now turn to the new clause 3, which seeks to require the Secretary of State to provide Parliament with regular reviews on the functioning of the internal market, the effectiveness of provisions in the UK Internal Market Act, and progress towards delivering provisions not in the Act, such as common frameworks. While I commend the intention behind the amendment, the review provisions it seeks to deliver are already provided for. They exist either within the UK Internal Market Bill, through the Office for Internal Market, or within previous legislation. As Part 4 of the bill sets out, the Office for the Internal Market will have a number of reporting and monitoring responsibilities. Clause 29 sets out how the Office will need to compile yearly health of the market reports on the functioning of the internal market and 5 yearly system reviews on the operation of Parts 1 to 3. These reports will be laid before the UK Parliament and the devolved legislators for consideration, ensuring parliamentary transparency and accountability. I consider, therefore, that this amendment risks being highly duplicative. It's essential that both these reports are compiled at arm's length from both the UK Government and devolved administration. This will enable the Office to deliver credible, impartial and expert analysis that delivers difficult messages to the administrations if necessary. However, when conducting these reports, the Office for the Internal Market will be able to consider the views of all relevant interested parties, including the devolved administrations, in order to present evidence on how well the internal market itself and the government's proposals is serving stakeholders across the UK. Moreover, regarding the specific areas listed in the amendment, the government already publishes quarterly reports entitled The European Union Withdrawal Act and Common Frameworks, which sets out joint progress on common frameworks.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and he's putting a brave face on things as always. It's all very well talking about reviews and reports, but does he accept that for an internal market to function, there actually needs to be communication between the Prime Minister and the leaders of the devolved administrations? Why has the Prime Minister failed to communicate on regular occasions with the First Minister of Wales, only speaking to him once every few months, especially at a time of national crisis? Why has the Prime Minister been so poor in his communication?
I know that the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State and Ministers indeed work with all of the devolved administrations, including my colleague in business who has meetings especially at this particular time with businesses across the devolved administration, including in Wales. But as I say, for this particular area, we already do publish that report that I referred to before, but we do consider it right that any reporting on the Joint Committee Machinery or the UK Shared Prosperity Fund should be undertaken separately from internal market provisions. And for that reason, I'm not able to accept this amendment.
Would the Minister confirm that Brexit is a huge opportunity both to increase the powers of this House over our own internal market and economic prosperity and the powers of the devolved administrations who will be gaining power? So shouldn't everybody cheer up and welcome the fact that both the devolved administrations and the Union Parliament can take back control?
I thank my right honourable friend for the opportunity to absolutely agree with him that this does give us a great opportunity to come together as a United Kingdom, to give that sense of certainty to businesses, but more importantly, just as importantly, to grab hold of opportunities that are provided by leaving the European Union. Before I address the amendments relating to the Northern Ireland Protocol measures in the bill, I'd just like to remind members of the points made by my honourable friend, the Minister of State at the Northern Ireland Office, during the Bills Committee last week. He made it clear that the Northern Ireland Protocol is designed to recognise and protect the needs and unique circumstances of Northern Ireland. Central to that is ensuring that the Belfast, the Good Friday Agreement and successor agreements and the gains of the peace process are protected. He stressed that it was crucial to ensure that the delicate balance between all communities in Northern Ireland is maintained and that the UK Government would pursue policies for sustained growth and stability in Northern Ireland. In this bill, we are acting to uphold those priorities and deliver the commitments we made in our election manifesto. Through this bill, we will provide unfettered access between Northern Ireland and Great Britain and maintain and strengthen the integrity and smooth operation of our internal market. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'll now speak to new Clause 1, which seeks to replace Clauses 42, 43 and 45 of the bill, as well as Amendment 16, which intends to remove Clause 45 from the bill. The Government has also already been clear that these clauses are required to provide a safety net of powers in reserve. Ministers may need to use these to guarantee the integrity of our United Kingdom and to ensure that we're always able to deliver on our commitments to the people of Northern Ireland, in line with the three-strand approach of the Belfast Agreement. I'll give way.
For giving way. He talks about this giving a safety net to the people of Northern Ireland. Does he recognise that the majority of people in Northern Ireland regard this bill as taking away their safety net by undermining the Good Friday Agreement? Yeah. That's the view in Northern Ireland, and it is important the government listen to that view, not act contrary to it.
Now, speaking to businesses in Northern Ireland, they, a number of them are very, very supportive of this, and I would suggest that anybody in Northern Ireland or elsewhere in the UK that believes this is actually taken away from the Belfast Agreement is listening to the willful misrepresentation of this bill from certain people within the politicking around this bill. Because actually what this does, the three-strand approach of the Belfast Agreement, this will only be the safety net in the event that we cannot reach agreement with the EU through the Joint Committee. I'll make progress at the moment because it's important points. Proposed new Clause 1 and Amendment 18 would remove that safety net, which we just can't agree with. These clauses were supported by clear majorities of the whole House at committee stage. I can reassure honourable members that many of the proposals in new Clause 1 are already addressed in the bill. First, the Government has been clear that the regulations made under Clauses 42 or 43 would be subject to judicial review on general public law grounds, whilst ensuring that any claims must be brought within 3 months. Now, this ensures any challenge to the regulations will be subject to timely resolution before the courts. This is essential to ensure that Northern Ireland businesses and investors in Northern Ireland have the certainty that they need. Amendments to this effect have already been agreed to at committee stage, and I thank my honourable friend from Bromley who helped make that happen. Second, on Article 16 of the Protocol, which the new Clause 1 mentions, in the event that regulations were made under Clause 42 or 43, we have been clear that we would activate appropriate dispute settlement mechanisms to find a solution in parallel to domestic legislation. Third, the UK government will continue, as it has always done, to negotiate with our friends and partners in the EU in good faith. For the avoidance of any doubt, let me confirm again that we are of course committed to implementing the withdrawal agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol, and have already taken many practical steps to do this. However, as a responsible government, we cannot allow the gains of the peace process or the economic integrity of the UK's internal market to...
Would he confirm that the government is not intending to break the law, and I don't think anything it's suggested is breaking the law? And would he confirm that those who say otherwise are deliberately undermining our negotiations with the EU?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that, and indeed our intention, as I say, is to work with implementing the withdrawal agreement and the Northern Ireland Protocol. And as I say, I talked about the fact we have taken many practical steps to do this. We continue to negotiate in good faith. I'm going to make progress because I've still got a number of amendments to cover, but we cannot accept any amendments which will undermine provisions in this bill by rendering them no kind of safety net at all. This clause does that, I'm afraid. I now turn to new clause 8, and I appreciate entirely the spirit with which this has been put forward. Whilst all of us hope that the EU will negotiate and discharge its obligations under the withdrawal agreement and protocol in good faith, this amendment seeks to frame in statute a number of steps that ministers could take under international law were that not to happen. However, this amendment isn't necessary, as it would already be open to ministers to take the steps he proposes. As mentioned, the government has been working with the European Union to reach agreement through the joint committee process, and through this bill we're preparing for a scenario where that does not happen. On the 17th of September, the government issued a statement setting out the circumstances in which it would use the powers provided for under clauses 42 and 43. The government would only ask Parliament to support the use of the provisions in 42, 43 and 45 of the UK bill, and any other similar subsequent provisions in the case of, in our view, the European Union being engaged in a material breach of its duties of good faith or other obligations, and thereby undermining the fundamental purpose of the Northern Ireland Protocol.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. Would you agree with me that those who object to the articles, the clauses that he's just mentioned, should bear in mind the language that has been used by the EU in recent weeks in terms of what they interpret the Northern Ireland Protocol to mean? They have denied the existence, as it is written on the face of the Northern Ireland Protocol, matters such as internal market, unfettered trade, and so on. And so these provisions are necessary as a safety net, nothing more a safety net. And I say to the critics, just look at the language of the EU, and if they look at the language of the EU, they will see that these measures are perfectly reasonable.
I'm grateful for that, and my honourable friend is absolutely right. These are reasonable steps to act as a safety net. The statement that I referred to earlier also makes clear that in parallel with the use of these provisions, the government would always activate appropriate formal dispute settlement mechanisms with the aim of finding a solution through this route. I've got a lot to go through. I know a number of speakers. I will happily give way to the move of that amendment.
Well, actually, to be fair, the Minister has just been dealing with new clause 8, which I've moved.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for what he said. He seemed to suggest that the new clause was not in itself wrong, but it wasn't necessary. But will he accept that certainly when this bill goes to the House of Lords, it might be helpful for the government to produce an idea like this as another arrow in the armoury to reassure those who want to use international law in the right way if the EU acts unreasonably. If the EU acts unreasonably, and the advantage of a unilateral interpretive declaration under the Vienna Convention is that you can do it this way. So I'm grateful to the Minister.
No, I'm glad to thank you for the right honourable friend for that, and it's right that he gets to speak as it was his amendment. I know he was trying to be very helpful in this regard, and I know that our ministers in the other place will take heed of his comments there as they engage with colleagues there. I turn now to new clause 7. I've got considerable sympathy again for the underlying aims of this amendment, and I hope that I can assure the right honourable member on the steps that the government is taking which makes this amendment unnecessary. The starting point is that this bill gives effect to our commitment to give unfettered access to Northern Ireland goods to the whole of the United Kingdom's internal market. This is done by ensuring that they benefit from mutual recognition and are not discriminated against, and by preventing any new checks or controls on these goods. The bill includes the safety net mechanism to ensure that genuine and full unfettered access from Northern Ireland to Great Britain can be delivered in any scenario through the removal of any export declarations or other exit procedures. While these provisions have understandably attracted the most attention in our debates on this bill so far, Clause 40 also includes significant provisions to cement Northern Ireland's integral place in the United Kingdom. That clause imposes a duty on public authorities to have regard to Northern Ireland's place in the UK's internal market and customs territory and to support the streamlining of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That is entirely in keeping with Article 6.2 of the Protocol and the requirement to use best endeavours as referred to in the Right Honourable Member's amendment. His amendment also calls for an assessment of the impacts of the Protocol on that trade to be published at least every 12 months. Mr Speaker, the Government has a history of supporting Parliament with updates, information and analysis on EU exit and implementation of the withdrawal agreement, including the Protocol. The Government is committed to continuing to do that. And in the command paper we published in May, we're committed to reviewing new procedures arising from the application of EU custom rules to goods entering Northern Ireland on an annual basis. If they should turn out to impose a disproportionate burden on goods moving wholly within the UK, we will consider how this burden can be further reduced or removed. But it's not necessary to...
I'm very grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker, to the Minister for allowing me to come in at this point. There's no need to consider what steps would be taken in that scenario, given the amendment is tabled this afternoon, that it is open to Government to agree that amendment today and thus give businesses in Northern Ireland who do not know, but suspect there may be divergence and may be difference and may be associated costs, give them that clarity and comfort today by accepting this amendment, because there's nothing that the Minister has said thus far that would be injurious to his position or that would frustrate his honourable colleagues from supporting this amendment this evening.
I thank the honourable gentleman. I think it's fair that I give way, hear Price from the other side. I think it's fair to give way to the people that have actually moved the amendment. But I don't believe, we will obviously consider how that we can reduce the burden further, but we don't think it's necessary at this stage to make such reporting a statutory requirement or to frame it, notwithstanding what the gentleman said, or to frame it in the very broad terms set out in the Right Honourable Member's amendment. Amendment 17 deals with the mutual recognition of authorisations granted under REACH. It would automatically allow a substance authorised to be placed on the market in Northern Ireland under EU REACH to be placed on the market in Great Britain. The exception to mutual recognition that we've introduced for chemicals in Schedule 1 of the Bill is there to allow the relevant authorities to respond to local factors. Authorisations granted by the EU after the end of the transition period will not take into consideration local conditions such as lower river flows or indeed exposure levels wherever those chemicals are used in Great Britain. I'd like to emphasise that authorisations relate to the use of substances of very high concern, such as chemicals that can cause cancer. It's important that the Government and devolved administrations can take local factors into account in order to prevent avoidable harm to human health or the environment from the significant risks posed by these chemicals. I'd like to...
I am very grateful, Mr Deputy Speaker, and that is, I guess, precisely the same terms in which response we received last week during committee stage. But we're not touching upon or interested in what the local considerations may be. The fact is, this bill, even though we're talking about non-discrimination and the implications that there could be for business, envisages businesses having to adhere to and satisfy two separate regulatory regimes. And we can't square that circle between discrimination and non-discrimination and two separate and distinct legal regimes, whether there's local factors or not. We should only have to adhere to one. And from a business perspective, and I'll touch on later in my speech from an animal welfare perspective, it would be useful to have clarity. One or the other.